Okay, we're going to be working on our texture boxes today. Before beginning, you should have filled out your texture worksheet. That should be completed first. After that, you will need a few things. You're going to need your templates, and you'll need 2 different sizes. You will also need to get 2 rulers, a rolling pin, and you'll need to get your clay. After getting your clay, you're going to begin to flatten the clay out, and you'll need a board to do that on. You don't want to do it directly on the surface of the table because it'll stick there. So I've got this clay here. I don't have a really big piece. It's not going to be enough to make my whole box because I don't need all that all at once. I've got a small surface to work on. I'm going to start out by pounding the clay flat and flipping it over. Pounding it and flipping it. I don't want to start with my rolling pin right away. I want to get it somewhat flat. Okay, I've got this somewhat flat. I'm going to lay my sticks on either side of this and make sure that my rolling pin can reach both sticks. Then I'm going to roll. I'm going to push forward little by little, and then I'm going to flip it over. It's okay if it comes off of the board. It just means you have a little too much clay. I want to continue rolling until my rolling pin is rolling directly on my sticks. Then I know I have a nice uniform thickness. So now my rolling pins are rolling on my sticks. So that means my clay is the thickness of my stick here. Okay, for our next thing we're going to do is to begin to cut out the pieces of our box. This is a nice uniform thickness. It's the thickness of the stick, and I've got my 2 different templates. I can either make a box that will be tall, in which case I'll need 1 of the base and 4 of these, or I can make a box that is rectangular, in which case this will be the floor. I'll need 2 sides and 2 other sides. In that case, I need 3 of these and 2 of these. I'm going to lay my pattern on here. I'm going to take some kind of a tool. A wooden knife is wonderful. And I'm going to very carefully cut around the edges, going as evenly as I can. And I'm going to fit as many on here as I can. I'm going to start another one. Looks like I'll only get 2 on this section. I'll start another one right here. At this point, I will take the 2 pieces I've cut out, very carefully lift them, and I'll set them aside to slightly begin to harden. And then I will get more clay and roll out the rest of my pieces. Now, as you begin to reuse clay, you don't want to just smush it together because you'll get air pockets in it. So I grabbed a little bit more clay because I have plenty here, but now I need to wedge this together to make sure that I eliminate air pockets. I don't want to flatten it when I wedge it. I want to compress it. So I push down with my palms, push down, and I turn it. And I'll do this for maybe 1 minute. And as I compress it together, the clay comes all together. The air pockets are eliminated. You notice I'm not flattening it out. I'm just compressing and pulling it together. So I will continue to do this for 30 or 40 presses. It usually takes about 1 minute. And when I have completed that, I'm Then I will go through the rolling out process again. As I get there, then I'm ready to begin pounding it out, flattening it out, and then I will begin rolling again. Okay, now we've got our pieces cut for our box. We don't have the cover cut yet, but the pieces for the box. And now we have to start applying our textures. Now there's a lot of ways to put textures on. Some ways you want these slabs to be very soft while you put the textures on. Other ways you want the slabs to be more firm. I'm going to add feathers. I'm making a dragon box, and I'm going to add some feathers because my dragon has feathers on his wings. And I brought this in from my house because I had this feather. So I'm going to take the feather, and I might place it on in several different spots, but I'm just going to start in one spot. So I place it on here. Then I can very gently but firmly press it into the clay. And this could be done with other things as well. And I can very lightly, not changing the shape of this, roll a rolling pin on it. And now I'm going to remove this feather very carefully. Take the edge of it and pull it out. Now as you look at it, you might say, well, I don't see it very well. Some things will show up very well, and some things I might have to accentuate the texture. So I'm just going to take one of my wooden tools, and I'm going to take that texture or that shape of that feather, and I'm going to continue it so I can really see the feather in there. So using my pattern and a little help with drawing, I'm going to get that feather in there a little bit more so we can see the textures. So I have one feather in. I would probably complete this one with 3 or 4 feathers. Another one that I want to put on is scales. My dragon has scales, and I'm going to press these in. And again, I'm just using the same tool, and I'm going to use one end of it, and I'm just going to press kind of gently, but enough so that I can see it, and I'm overlapping and really just making a bit of a pattern. And as I continue across here, my scales overlap. And again, I would continue the pattern throughout the whole thing. I will do that over the whole surface. Some textures require that you're going to work with this a little harder. I'm going to do a couple more textures. One of them is going to be flames, and I'm going to use my slip to build that up. Okay, I've completed the texture on the scales of the dragon, and I've completed the texture on the feathers for the wings of my dragon. My other 2 slabs that I'm putting textures on, I'm going to be doing things that are more delicate. So I want to do the next step. Now this is what's called a soft slab. When I try to hold it up, it falls over. What I want to do is take these slabs and dry them to the point where they will stand up without flipping over. I don't want them too dry. So we're going to place this today in front of the fan, and we're going to leave it here for no more than 5 minutes. So I'm going to turn the fan on, and we'll let these dry for a little bit. Okay, this has dried out for about 5 minutes. During that time, I did flip them one time, and now the difference between how loose they were before is that these will stand up. They'll hold their own weight instead of flipping over. So this is called a hard slab. And it's still very moist and very soft, but it's strong enough that it holds itself up. Now I'm going to need a bottom for my box, and I'm going to put my name on the bottom of the box before beginning. So I'm going to use a tool or a paper clip, and I'm going to carve my name pretty neatly into the bottom of my box before beginning. I want it to be nice enough that I can see it, and then I'll rub away any little loose pieces of clay. And then I'm going to actually flip that over. That's going to be the bottom of my box. I'm going to have two sides to this box, like this, and I'm going to have two ends to the box, like this. I'm going to put these together using score slip smear. So I've got my side that is the scales right here. And I'm going to be putting it next to this side here. And I can build on top or on the side, wherever it fits best. As you use these, they do stretch and change shape a little bit. I'm going to put this one right on the outside edge. And using a tool or a paper clip, I'm going to score the edge, and I'm going to score the edge of the bottom. That loosens up the clay, makes it easier to join together. And then I'm going to take some of my slip, and I'm going to generously put slip along one edge. I should cover all of the score lines. And then I'm going to put my piece up next to it, kind of firmly push it on there. Now it's still going to be pretty delicate, even though it's a firm slab, but it'll kind of hold by itself. You can see it's sort of holding up there. And I'm going to begin to use my finger, or I can use a tool to begin to smooth out that line in there. And then I'm going to get a little extra clay, not very much. I'm going to just move this back a little bit. And I'm going to roll out a very, very skinny coil, a very skinny coil. There's hardly anything to this. So a nice skinny coil. And I'm going to put that on my seam. And I'm going to, first off, press it into my seam. And I've got a lot of extra coil on here, just cut off those little edges. And then I'm going to smooth and smear it in using my fingers or any type of tool. And this is where I'm going to really, really make sure that seam is smoothed in. I don't want any of the lines of the seam to show. So I'm really just pushing it in there. And then I'm going to use whatever tool or my fingers to just smooth that in so I get rid of all evidence that that was two pieces of clay. Now it looks like one piece. I might look at the outside edge too, and I'll say, well, that shows there as well. So I'm going to take my tool, kind of pull that edge together, and still see a little of the slip coming out, smooth it out, and sometimes you even need another little coil on the outside edge. When I add my next side, so that's going to go right here. It happens to be the ones that I put the feathers on. I'm going to score two edges. So I'm going to score along this edge and along this edge, along this edge, and along this edge, because I'm putting two parts together. Then I'm going to add slip to it, and again I have to put enough slip on here. You can be generous with slip. Slip is the stuff that we like to call clay glue. It gets the clay to join. You've just scored it up and made it rough, and now you're going to put this on so it gets into all the joints. Put that piece on there, kind of firmly press it in. Kind of rub it a little bit with your finger or even a tool if your finger doesn't fit in there. And then again, I'm going to take a little bit of clay and I'm going to roll out a very, very skinny coil. There's not hardly anything to this coil. You don't need a real thick one. And I will lay that coil along the bottom edge, and I will lay the other coil along the corner, and I will again press them in and then use my tool and my fingers to make those seams disappear, and eventually turning to the outside of the box and making sure the outside edge seam is sealed as well. I will continue with the other two sides. So when you are completed at the end of each day, you must wrap up your box or any clay pieces very carefully. Yesterday, as I got finished, I wrapped up my piece, so I'm going to unwrap it now and get the box out. I did complete all sides on the box yesterday. My textures on two sides were done. My textures on two sides were not done, so I wrapped those extra carefully because I wanted those to remain nice and pliable. I want to be able to work with them some more. As I completed my box, I was very careful to make sure that all edges are smoothed out, and I did that simply with my fingertip by rubbing on the edges, the bottom edges, just to make it as smooth and perfect as possible. So I've got two more sides to complete for the dragon box. On one side, I'm going to add talons. And the talons were created just a little earlier, and I wrapped them up to keep them nice and soft. So these are going to be little talons, and they're going to go on like this. Anytime I put something on or add it to the box, I'm going to have to score, slip, and smear. So I'm planning to put on the talons as another texture, and I'll put 3 on top and 1 underneath, like it's a little claw sticking out. So with this, I will score each piece. I'll decide where I'm going to put them. Maybe I'll put some little lines, so I know, little dots, so I know where they'll go. I'll score this area as well. I'll add some slip. I really only have to add slip to one part. Stick the talon on there. Now that's not going to be quite enough. Then I have to very carefully go around the edge and smear it on. This is probably the most important part in making sure that it sticks well. If I can't get around there easily, I can also take a small amount of clay and again make a very, very, very tiny coil. A very, very skinny coil. This is so skinny it's almost like a string. And I can also add that around. It's another way to make sure that it really gets on there, and then I can smear that in. I have a little more clay to work with as I smear that in. And I will of course want to make it as smooth and as neat as I possibly can. And then if I want to add a little bit of texture on my talon, I can do that as well. I'm going to add 3 talons here and 1 here. On my fourth side, my fourth texture for my dragon is going to be fire. And I've decided to do this with slip. So I'm simply going to paint on some flames, and I'm going to make them stick up a bit. I might take a tool to help me, and I might begin by drawing where will my flames go. So I've got a little area to decide on. If I draw incorrectly, I can just take my finger and smooth out the line so it's not going to be a mistake. So I can decide just exactly how do I want these flames to look before I put them on here. And then I can take my slip and I can lay this on here and kind of build it up so it's going to be kind of a real bumpy texture. It's going to stick out quite a way. Now this has to be a last thing that you do, because anytime I touch this slip, it's going to change its shape. It's going to flatten out. So I want to make sure I'm about done with my box as I begin to add the flames on. Okay, so I will continue doing these 2 sides and complete them. Then I will need to make the cover for the box. Now, you could have cut out a cover earlier, but as you work with the box, sometimes it changes shape, so you want to, a better idea is to do the box at the, or the cover to the box at the end. I'm taking a piece of clay out of here. I'm going to move my box back so I don't bump it. And again, I'm going to flatten this out, just like I did before. Before I begin rolling it, I use my 2 sticks as my guidelines. I roll forward little by little, and then I want to make sure I flip it so it doesn't stick. Roll forward until I know that my rolling pin is rolling right on the sticks. Now, to make the shape of my cover just right, I'm going to take my box and use that as my template. So I'm going to put that on there, and then I'm going to lightly trace around it first, just using a wooden tool or a paper clip, whatever I want to cut my clay with. You can see it's a little bit odd shape because my box is stretched slightly. That's okay. Then I'll more carefully cut it out. Take away my extra clay here. Set that aside. Maybe make the edges just a little bit smoother. Now, when I'm going to be using this cover, I don't want to just leave it as is, because if I tip the box, it'll slide right out. So another step I want to do is make a little lip on this box. So again, I will take pieces of clay, and I'm going to roll them into a coil. This coil is going to be just a little thicker than those other coils, but not too thick. So it's going to be about that thick. I want to make sure the lip is on the inside of this edge, so I have to do a little estimation. That edge is about as big as my coil, so I want to make sure I put that in at least that far. Would cut this and see how long I want it. I'm going to make a little estimation. And again, I will take this and I will score. Decide where I'm going to put it, right about there. I'm going to make a little end on each one so I know it's a little guideline. I'll score on here. I will add my slip to it. I'm going to be generous with the slip. That's our clay glue. Put the scored side down. Press it in place. And then again, I'm going to combine this onto here as smoothly and neatly as I can. I'll do that on all the sides. I will continue this all the way around. So I've been working a little while on my cover and on the box. I have applied slip onto this side to give flames, and I drew a few little curlicues for the idea of smoke from my dragon breathing. And then on this side, I added talons, and then I added some scratch marks. So those were sort of my finishing details. Now, sometimes you will find that it is hard to get into areas to smooth. So I brought out one of my paintbrushes, and I've used it to smooth inside areas that are very, very small, very hard to get into. I have added the lip onto my lid, and again with my paintbrush, I use this in some of the areas to make sure all parts are smooth and they're sealed very well. So I use my paintbrush a little bit. In the meantime, I've made a crown, and this is going to be the handle on top of my lid. But I can't apply it quite yet because this slab is still very soft. So what I'm going to do for the next 5 minutes is put this underneath the fan to firm up a little bit. Then I will apply the crown. So I've dried this out under the fan for about 5 minutes, watching it carefully. You don't want it to get too dry. And as you can see, it is nice and strong. It's nice and firm. It's not so pliable. So that now I'm able to turn it over and it doesn't go in the center. First off, I'm going to do just a little bit on the edge with my fingers to smooth out all the corners, edges, and just to get them as comfortable to touch as I can. You don't want any sharp edges on your clay because after it's fired, it could be sharp enough to actually cut you. So you want to make sure that you deal with all of your edges very carefully. And since it's slightly firm now, it doesn't really change the shape of it as much as if I did this a little bit earlier. Well, just a little bit will make it much better. Then I'm going to get out the crown that I had made, and it was wrapped so it wouldn't get too dry. And we're going to be putting that crown in the center. That will be the handle for this. So I'm going to score. I'm going to figure out where that placement will be, so I've got it right in the center. I'm going to do a little scoring on here as well. A generous application of slip. Again, the wonderful clay glue that helps things stay together. The crown will go on the center. Put that on there firmly. And then I would get a small amount of clay again, roll out a very skinny coil, and this is just going to help me seal it on there. So I will take, maybe I'm going to take my paintbrush and just take a little of that slip away that is coming out before I put the coil on. Then I can put the coil on after I get it nice and skinny, and I will begin using my tools and smear that both onto the cover and onto the crown, and I'll do that all the way around. So I have completed all parts of my dragon texture box. I've got a crown for the little handle on top. It's smoothly joined on. I've got a nice lip here so that when I put the cover on, it will fit and it won't slide off. It stays on. I've got textures on all sides. I've got the talons that stick out and carved in. I've got my fire that is made out of slip. It's still quite wet. You can see that it's drying. I've got my pressed in feathers for the wings of the dragon. And I've got the scales of the dragon that cover that entire side. And on the bottom, I have got my name. This one happens to say Dragon Box, but you would put your name on it. Now it's time for it to be fired.